Capital News Online is here with Guy Giorno, business lawyer and professor at Carleton University, and the former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. We're also joined by Brad Levine, Principal Secretary to the Federal New Democratic Party. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about political strategy in an age of low voter turnout. So to begin, to what extent does low voter turnout affect political strategy?
Go ahead. I'll let you start.
Well, thanks, Lord. It's obviously a challenge because political parties are trying to do two things. They're trying to sell themselves, sell their program, to communicate with the public. At the same time, they're trying to engage the public, trying to engage the electorate, because something as a nonpartisan consideration. At the end of each campaign, what we're trying to do is get our voters out, and you can't get your voters out unless they're engaged and motivated. You get them a reason to set aside whatever they're doing in their busy lives to get out there. So, part and parcel of what we're trying to do is to motivate, to engage, to give people a reason to go and mark that X. And low turnout is a challenge. It says in some respects that we've failed in our jobs of getting people to turn out to vote.
Your question, what impact does it have on the strategy? And I would suggest it plays a significant role in the strategy for many of the reasons outlined. Obviously, you're attempting to ensure that your supporters get out, but at the same time, when you have low voter turnout, it gives you a starting point as to who you need to target and who you need to motivate. A good example, I would suggest, in the May 2011 election campaign, where the Democratic Party of Canada does very well among supporters between the ages of 18 and 24. In public domain polls, we always do very well among that demographic. In fact, it is one of our best demographics. The challenge, of course, is that they had the lowest voter turnout of any demographic. So going into the 2011 campaign, we actually focused a lot of what we did, the tools that we used, the messages that we crafted in an effort to motivate that. At the same time, we're obviously looking at demographics who do turn out to vote. And while it is true that voter turnout is far too low at the federal level, we've even seen at the provincial level in the most recent provincial elections very low voter turnout, under 50% in the province of Ontario in its most recent election. This is troubling. One demographic, though, that is consistently showing up is the older demographic, 65 plus. They have the best voter turnout rate. The challenge, of course, is that they're more predisposed to vote Conservative. So our dilemma going into the 2011 election campaign was that our best demographic had the worst turnout, and our worst demographic, the Conservatives' best demographic, had the best turnout. So we actually catered quite a bit of what we did to that, trying to blunt our lack of support by gaining seniors' votes, and at the same time attempting to motivate. And that became a defining feature of our 2011 election campaign.
Are there any examples you'd like to add, Mr. Giorno, from your experience?
Well, I think to pick up what Brad was saying, it's always a challenge to figure out how to communicate with voters. There are only a limited number of ways you can. There's TV advertising, and some radio advertising. There's trying to get on the nightly news or the newspaper front pages or the radio news to communicate. All the parties have had, this speaks directly to the question about the younger portion of the electorate. All the parties have been experimenting, too mild a word, have been using, but starting to employ social media to try to find out ways of attracting, not attracting, engaging, to talking to the youth vote. So our party, like others, was involved in using digital media. But I've got to say, I don't think that any Canadian political party is there yet. Is using those media the way that young people are using them to communicate with them where they are, and I think we've got to do that. I mean, all parties have to do that. It's important to the political parties. It's important to the political process.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's right. I don't think that worldwide, Canada, I think, lags behind some of the other social media leaders in the world. I think in the United States and in Britain, I think they're a bit further ahead than we are. Although I think we're making strides in catching up to the worldwide. I'll give you an example. One of the things that motivates an individual to vote is whether or not they feel that they have a stake in the electoral outcome. And what we've been watching over the last number of years is we've been trying to answer the question, why is voter turnout becoming so low? And we're far from having all the answers, but beginning in our attempt to begin to answer that question, there is a distancing between what the voter sees as a relevant act of voting. That is, the outcome has no impact on me, or at our federal level, the Canadian state, the federal state, has no direct impact on my life. Because we know that people are engaged. We see them active, whether it be in groups, associations that keep propping up, certainly among young people. Young people are engaged. You take a look at any political organization, campus activities. Young people are engaged, just not in federal politics. Why? They don't see themselves either in the political parties, in the offerings, or they don't see what is relevant in their daily lives. We needed to go to where they were. And in fact, take a look at a budget. Both parties probably spent around $22, $23, $24 million at the central level in the federal campaign. For the first time ever, we spent about $1 out of every $9 that we spent on advertising, we spent online. Because what we're finding is increasingly people are not getting their news from the traditional 11 o'clock news, whether it's Peter Mansbridge, Lois Robertson, or in the French language media. They're not getting their news from the morning newspapers. They're getting it online, and they're getting it from their friends. And so for politics to be relevant, we have to be where people are consuming news, information, and their entertainment. Maybe 25 years ago, that would have been maybe 2 or 3 channels in English and a couple of national newspapers. Today, it's much more spread out, and I think political parties are smart to find where they are at and taking the message to that spot.
You know, the issue, the difficulty that all political parties have in communicating with voters is not just a function of age. I mean, Brad's talked about younger voters, but it's true just increasingly. More voters are turning online. There are more specialty channels. The day will come, soon when people are actually going to be able to personalize, right, their TV or video viewing. So you won't be sitting and watching the same hockey game, or sports game you watch live, but everything else you won't watch the same time as everybody else. And we'll have to figure out ways of communicating. So it's not young people think, but they're on the cutting edge.
That's right. And now we're fast forwarding through the commercials.
Right.
That's our messages. So we have to find ways to get the messages through the new world, right? The new reality.
One thing that we, another consideration is it easy enough to vote? And we've made great strides in Canada, not like the rest of the world yet, but in making it easier to vote. Now you can vote every day, but maybe it's still not easy enough. I mean, both in federal elections, the recent Ontario campaign, you could, what was the advertising? You could vote every day. You could vote every day if you found where your local returning office was and trucked all the way over there. It's still probably we can explore more. Online voting, mail-in voting.
Manitoba experimented with this very challenge. They actually put polling stations up at the airport and at shopping malls, so that you could be absolutely not intending to vote, but you're out there shopping, or you're on business or personal travel, and see a polling station, and it becomes almost an impulse as opposed to something that you have to set out to do. Which also I know that some provinces are experimenting with things online. Online balloting. I think we'll see more of that in the future, more experimentation to make sure that it's as accessible as not. One day we'll be able to vote on our Blackberries and our smartphones.
Yeah, we have that it's funny, we have that at the municipal level in so many communities in Canada. Nobody's raised a fuss. There have been no problems, no concerns.
Well, kind of building off that, are there any specific methods being employed by parties to rectify low voter turnout that you want to add? I know we've talked about it a bit, but is there anything you've kind of done in particular?
Well, I mean, it may be a matter of coincidence, but I mean, obviously, we want to create a lifelong connection with our voter, with our base. And one of the things we were doing coming out of the 2011 elections, we have now, hundreds of thousands of first-time voters who've never voted before, whether it be young people because they became a voting age, or new Canadians. Second demographic that I would mention between the 18 to 24, of course, is new Canadians. There was a very interesting post-election analysis that was done among people who self-identify themselves as immigrants or new Canadians. And overwhelming numbers, if they were here in the country for less than 10 years or less, they would vote in a Democrat. If they were here for 10 years or longer, they were more likely to vote Conservative. And then we've got our 18 to 24-year-old demographic, where we, again, have done very, very well in getting them. So now that we've got these folks kind of in large numbers, we've received 4.6 million votes in the last federal election campaign. A good number of those folks are, again, first-time voters. Now that we've kind of got them engaged at one level, our next challenge, or where we're putting our next kind of thought to, is how do we get them to come back in 4 years? They're going to be obviously a little older from that first cohort, and they'll be in Canada a little longer, just to stick with these two examples. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the near and medium term is going back to them and saying, you know, you voted for us back in 2011. We started something together. You voted for change. You looked at the other offers and said that they weren't for you, but we were. Now we need you back again. We need you back again to kind of close the deal and maybe unseat the Conservative Party of Canada from government and finish the job that you folks started in 2011. A very inspirational, very kind of collective thing. So what is in it, in addition to electing your local MP, making an individual choice, we're actually doing something in a much broader scale. And we're going to see how that works, whether or not the act of voting as something of a civic duty, that's something your parents did or something that your grandparents did, and people fought in wars for us to be able to ensure that we could do. Is there a broader point here, something that basically bringing people along to a collective action where we're going to build a better country together, but we need you to do one thing, and that is you need to come in and finish the job that you started back in 2011. Quite inspirational, but we're going to try to see if that will work. And once you get the first-time voter with you, you have to make sure that they become lifelong voters with you as well.
To pick up on something Brad said and to underscore for people who are watching, this is something that political parties are doing all the time between campaigns. You know, if people are watching, you've got to understand that it's not something that political parties look at every 4 years and worry about this. We will, as the New Democrats Liberals will be maintaining ongoing communication with all Canadians, first of all, but particularly those who voted for us. And every political party wants to validate, to reaffirm that choice. In government wants to conduct itself in a way. In opposition, parties want to conduct themselves in a way. The people who voted for your party feel good about that choice. Every month, every year, they remember and they think, yeah, I would do that again because I'm proud of my choice, and that requires both the parties conduct themselves honorably, keep their promises, but also they communicate and maintain this dialogue with their supporters, and that's a very important part of this. Some people denigrate this as a permanent campaign, but it really it's permanent, but it's an ongoing relationship with Canadian voters.
It's an ebb and flow of the system. I think it's somewhat some cases cyclical. You try not to, but I think other activities can also kind of draw attention to it. Of course, the New Democratic Party of Canada is in the middle of its leadership race right now, and that is another opportunity for us to engage individuals. I'm very excited at the range of candidates that are entering the field, because different candidates are going to speak to different segments of the society, both from within our traditional voting base, 4.6 million people, but also reaching out to those that maybe didn't vote a Democrat. They will use the opportunity of the leadership race to try to draw those individuals in, and if we do it right, we could attract a lot more support
Brad,
than we did in May.
In your position, you have to be neutral, though, right? I don't have to be. So if I wanted to sign up and vote for the candidate of my choice, could I do that?
I welcome that. You just can't be a member of another political party.
Oh.
You can, but you're more than welcome to join our party if you fit the.
I guess I don't.
That's the only thing you have to do is not be a member of another federal party.
And when you're planning a campaign, to what extent does your voting base come first?
I'll speak against in general terms. I think it's true of all parties. I don't think the base. I think all voters are treated equally. Every party has to figure out how it's going to win an election. That means identifying that group. Sometimes there's a term called a coalition. That coalition of voters that will win the election, and you can't afford to ignore any part of that. If you figured out how many people you need to win an election, you need to get all those votes. And the first, the last, they're all equally important. Some of those voters you're persuading, some you're mobilizing because they're already persuaded. But I don't think you can't say that any part of your winning coalition is more important than any other, is it?
Well, I think that there's a sequence of steps that a party can take in order to address them. I'll take the point of equality, because all voters are equal, but I mean, to lose your base makes it very difficult to pick up. And I'm calling the base your traditional core voter. If you don't have your base, it's very hard to go for the next tier of voter. We've actually I've been with the party now for 9 years, and I was with Mr. Layton's leadership campaign and came up with him when he was first elected leader in 2003. And the first attempt in 2004 was, our goal at that time in that election campaign was to reassemble. We found ourselves throughout the 1990s obviously having a rough patch where our support levels were below where we knew that they could be. So we actually spent a couple of elections just reassembling what we had defined as a traditional social democratic voter base, about 16, 17, 18% of the electorate. We got there following the 2008 election campaign. So it took 3 elections for us to feel comfortable that we had regained that level of support. And again, obviously, if somebody wanted to come to us, we weren't going to turn them away, but we knew that we needed to get that base first. Then we would go after the next year. We actually spent quite a bit of time between 2008 and 2011. I served as the campaign director, and one of the first things I said was, we now need to study who is open to voting for the Democratic Party of Canada, but is currently not. What is blocking them from actually getting there? Is it policy? Is it leadership? What attributes? We actually learned as much as we could about them. Not unlike marketing research for a consumer product. What is their age? What is their gender? How much money do they make? Where do they live? Who were they? So that we could then identify those individuals, find out what made them tick, and then begin to cater our message towards them. Very interestingly enough, there were many similarities and differences from that next tier of voter, as I called it, and the base. Our base was predominantly female, but our next tier of voter was male. They were a bit better off financially. They were a bit higher up on the chain of command within the workplace. And so we tailored our messaging to go towards them. And as you saw in the lead up and during the May 2011 election campaign, we began to identify and connect with that next tier voter. And so we started to poll at 20%, and then at 22%, and then at 25%. And as we were, gaining steam, the next tier of voter, we were able to identify and come to. We got 31% on election day. So we were able to research who the next tier was. At the same time, we knew that we could never lose the base, that is the core voter, but that the base would stay there as long as we established the credibility of the leader with them, and that there was a trust. And so as long as those folks stayed there, we could then go and reach up for the next tier. And we feel that we were very successful in doing that in May. Now, of course, the next challenge is holding those 4.6 million Canadians that voted for the Democrats. So far, it looks as though we are in the public domain poll, although it's very easy. And of course, we take nothing for granted. We're working hard every day to earn those people's trust to get to the next tier, to get to just over the 5.5 million mark that the Conservatives have gained to form government.
You see, politics is littered with histories of parties that have lost support on their base, have eaten into their base while trying to expand it, and that is obviously counterproductive.
So to wrap things up with a look towards the future, what have you learned about voters in this previous election campaigns that you can apply to the next election, possibly in 2015?
If you give them a reason to vote, they will vote. That's succinct, but I think somewhat accurate.
I agree with that. I'll add. I think all parties learned. Certainly, we've learned. Nobody should underestimate the voters. Voters are astute, they're good judges. They know what they want. They know what's in the best interest of the country, and you've got to treat them with that respect. And I think the parties, politicians that fail to do that, are the ones that end up suffering.
And that concludes our panel. Thanks for watching Capital News Online.